and welcome to episode 17 of the Aha Moment. My name is Amanda Kochirka, and I'm very excited to be introducing today's episode, which is entitled Success by Design, Aligning Roles, Goals, and Expectations. I'm also excited to have our guest with me today, Amy Rohler, who is the Executive Director of United Way of Chautauqua County. Amy, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's really great to be here, Amanda. Fun fact, this is the very first podcast I've ever been on.
Yay! We're so honored to be your first. So thank you again for joining us. And before we jump into today's content, I'd love to have you just explain to our listeners a little bit about you and your background and how you came into your role at United Way.
Yeah, I'd love to. So I'm the executive director of United Way of Chautauqua County. I've had that role since 2017, so about 8 years. And prior to that, I was the executive director of a nonprofit that tended to be a little bit more grassroots for about 8 years as well. So a lot of nonprofit work, a lot of work with boards. And because we're United Way, we also are a funder. So we fund and do grants to 38 agencies here in Chautauqua County.
Mm-hmm.
So I come not only with my own experience running what is a relatively small organization team-wise, to sort of lots of insights and seeing how all these other nonprofits are doing what they do. We provide a lot of support and coaching in addition to funding as well. And just an interesting thing that we've recently been through, which maybe some of your listeners have been through, whether they're, for profit or not for profit, is that we've recently merged to United Ways. Mm. So I spent about the last 18 months doing a lot of work merging two organizations, and that required a lot of conversation, a lot of meetings, a lot of administrative work, but also kind of like people work. There's a lot of emotional labor in that. So kind of merging cultures, merging boards, some of the legal and fiscal activities involved with that. And then even just the communication to our many stakeholders, which were donors, again, the nonprofit agencies that we support, volunteers. So it's been taking up a lot of my time. Thank God the New York State Attorney General finally approved our merger, which takes a long time, nothing to do with us and our application, just the process takes time in July. So we're now officially the United Way of Chautauqua County. And it's been a great journey, honestly, really great. Learned a lot through the process for sure.
Super exciting. And so this topic, considering everything that you've been going through over the last several months, is especially timely, right? So,
yes, like expectations, clarity of expectations and roles for sure in a merger in a way that I probably didn't even anticipate and probably made a few missteps along the way. I can only imagine.
Yeah. So. Well, learning opportunities, right? And that's
right. I was failing forward.
Yes. Love it. So let's jump in a little bit. So what we want to talk about today, and I want to highlight the importance of when we talk about aligning expectations, especially in the context of what we're talking about here today, we're not just talking about hires for the organization. We're talking about board members. We're talking about volunteers, all the different roles that exist within, especially a nonprofit structure. That alignment is super important to understand, before you start going down any kind of path. So let's start with, you've hired employees in your career, you've selected volunteers and board members in the various roles that you've had. So what happens when you go into that process and that role clarity is missing?
It's challenging if there's not, and I think sometimes we can think that we have clarity too. So we might have a document, for example, that lays out like board member expectations or volunteer expectations, or we have a document like a job description, and we've had an interview and somehow we think the clarity is there, or it's real clear for us as the leader or the person who, is hiring or is in charge of the initiative, whatever it is. But I think when that clarity is missing, one of the things that I see a lot is I think you get a lack of engagement early on. Yes. And maybe you don't see that at first, because usually people are pretty excited about whatever it is, whether it's joining a board or it's joining a team. Yeah. But when it's really, really unclear as to what their expectations are, sometimes what the timeline might be on how this is going to go, I think that's the first thing that you see is they 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 disengage.
Yeah, that honeymoon period's real short.
Yeah, and sometimes it's hard to know too different. So it's like if it's not clear, is it, or is that just a personality and they're quiet and they don't like jump right in, or are they just taking everything in and they're the kind of person that just like takes a minute to process and they listen and then they ask questions. So it's often not clear early on.
Sure.
If that clarity is part of the reason they might be disengaged, because different people react differently and respond differently to new, situations.
Absolutely.
So I think that's the first thing that seems to happen when that clarity isn't there. Is definitely like a lack of engagement, or even like a lack of what's the word I'm looking for? Like even like living up to like the roles and responsibilities. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
We in our fundraising that we do, we use volunteers, to sort of be part of like this team that helps us get into like different sectors.
Sure.
And I had what I thought was a really clear conversation with this person. I had a sort of a little job description, it was even like an in-person conversation, exchanged some emails about it. And it wasn't clear to her because she didn't even show up at the first meeting.
Oh no.
and not even, and then she didn't show up at the second meeting.
Oh.
And so, obviously something had gone wrong there,
Yeah.
Where she didn't understand the expectations but didn't feel comfortable clarifying, or I don't know. Honestly, I still to this day am not quite sure like what the missed connection was, if she forgot she was going on vacation or what. But that's always a little bit of a challenge when you're working with volunteers as opposed to staff too. It's like you have a little bit more face time with staff, and obviously you've got some, just a little bit of influence and power that exists in a different way than with volunteers, where you're sort of like almost, I don't know, not selling them on it, but you're trying to really like, you have to use different means of getting them to be engaged.
Yeah,
as a volunteer
absolutely.
than you do like with a staff person. So
yeah,
I think it actually happens a lot that the role clarity is missing and we just didn't know because it was so clear to us.
Yes. And that's a really important component to all of this, right? Is that assumption piece. And I think you touched on a really good point in talking about, when there isn't that clarity, the person who is in the role or, in the process of moving into the role may not always be comfortable coming to their supervisor, coming to the executive director or the volunteer coordinator, whomever, and saying, hey, I'm not clear on this, because I think there's also this, I'm in a new job or in a new role and I really want to do a good job and I want to show them that I know what I'm doing. And if I go and ask this question or if I ask for clarity, they're going to think I don't know what I'm doing and that putting me in this position was a mistake. So I think there's assumptions kind of made on both sides about asking for that clarity. And then it's just this kind of jumbled up mess of miscommunication, and it can be hard to move through that. So I think that transparency and clarity from the get-go is super, super important.
Yeah, I like the word transparency that you used because, if from the beginning, like if you're an onboarding employee, you say, listen, please come ask me if you have any questions, or you kind of set the standard that like, especially there's no wrong question. My office door is always open. Please feel free to come talk to me. And if I'm not clear, please come ask a clarifying question about it.
Yes.
I think that helps people feel more comfortable about it. I think it's also a little bit different too when you're coming into an environment where you're part of a team and then you feel like the only member of the team who seems to like, not know what they're doing, or you're the new person, as opposed to more of like a one-on-one relationship that you might have if you're like their direct supervisor doing some onboarding. So I think there's some circumstances, but setting that culture from the beginning of it's okay to ask questions, please clarify, and also multiple channels of trying to make it clear.
Yes.
I think is important too. Like a written out piece of paper, something that's actually written out, a conversation, like an email, maybe a weekly check-in, especially with an employee. I think that helps.
Definitely.
And I always say, it doesn't matter how amazing you are as a leader, or how good you are in your job, or how much experience you have. Like, any new environment is simply new to you. And
Yes.
it is going to take some onboarding. You're not going to know from the start everything about the company, everything about the culture. And you kind of have to all of us have to like level set our expectations about what's possible for someone in a
Yes.
brand new environment.
Yeah, including the person themselves. I think, we do a
Yeah.
lot of
Oh, yeah.
executive recruitment and we place people in positions all the time and we have a structured onboarding cadence that we follow and we
Mhm.
have these conversations and sometimes we have candidates who are like trying to boil the ocean. It's like
Yeah.
you've been there for, 60 days.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's okay if you don't know everything yet. You've got to give yourself some time and space to understand the role and understand the organization. So it's,
Well, and
putting
I
all
kind
that
of have
pressure is crazy.
this rule that I say it takes 9 months to get used to anything.
Mhm.
And that can be a new job, that can be a new relationship, a new
Sure.
house or that you move into. And it doesn't mean that you're not competent and really good at what you do. It's
Right.
more like 9 months before you feel really, really comfortable
Mhm.
in your role.
Yes.
And so, we talk sometimes about like, 60-day and 90-day and certainly like we do hopefully some kind of performance evaluation
Mhm.
typically at a year, but I often like tell people that from the beginning that like my expectations are it's going to be 9 months before you're feeling totally comfortable part of this team, or you
Yeah.
understand the culture, or you have some, you know, knowledge of United Way and what we do and feel comfortable. And that would be true
Mhm.
for a staff person, a board member where you're only meeting maybe once a month.
Yep.
I think it just takes time to reach those kind
Absolutely.
of developmental milestones of like how it is that you come into anything that's new.
Yeah, no question. Absolutely. I like that rule of thumb. Kind of takes a little bit of the pressure off,
Mhm.
hopefully. So when you're starting a process of whether it's looking for a new employee or finding a new board member, a new volunteer, what does it look like to define what does success look like? And how have
Mm.
you done that in the past?
I think for me, I think alignment of all the stakeholders.
Mm.
Now, even if you're onboarding a new employee, it's like, or even beginning to post a job description, frankly, does the manager of the person, are you and the executive director or the CEO on the same page about
Mhm.
what onboarding looks like? If it's a board, and an executive director, and I think you see this a lot in the nonprofit world where the board um, sometimes is not completely aligned with the
Yep.
executive director that they hire, and mostly because they're not like HR experts sometimes, and they're doing a little bit of the hiring work and the recruitment
Mhm.
work. And in theory, the onboarding work, I think I see that more, not so much in my own organization, but I've seen that with a lot of nonprofits where
Sure.
that misalignment about like who's doing the onboarding, what does it look like, how are you going to sort of check in whether or not
Mhm.
you're being successful in onboarding, like I think that alignment before you start is really important, especially when there might be multiple people playing some roles in that
Yes.
onboarding. I often, you know, when I'm onboarding a new employee, I very intentionally am not sort of like their sole source of like information and
Mm.
sort of assimilation.
Mhm.
So I'll have them meet with like different members of the team for different like pieces of information or orientation, and kind of I draft out the timeline. And so the
Yeah.
first 2 weeks is usually like very intensely drafted out. Like they've got meetings in their calendars, it's already set up. I've talked to the people who might be involved in those meetings. They're clear on what they're supposed to do.
Mhm.
And then they still have kind of like a calendar that looks out like 3 months, but of course it becomes a lot more loose
Sure.
because we don't know what's going to come up. And they're going to start putting stuff on their own calendars, at that
Right.
point. But anything that I know is happening in the next 3 months, whether it's a committee meeting or it's a community meeting that we're doing, or a team meeting or whatever it might be, I try and like put it on their calendar so they have a really strong sense of what's
Mhm.
coming. But the other people involved know also the role they're playing with that new
Yes.
person. So I think that alignment helps things be really successful.
Mhm.
I think there's something around, and this is a little bit harder. It sort of happens naturally and it also happens intentionally, but culture. I
Yes.
think um I try and communicate culture before I hire the person, like in an interview or in like a
Sure.
second interview. But I'm also really careful. Like I might be a little crazy in this way, but like if the person hasn't started and they are not on the payroll, like the only communication they get from me is sort of like very, like here's your start date, here's some
Yeah.
paperwork that kind of thing. And I want to be careful not to be, you know, accidentally like engaging them in the work before they're being
Sure.
paid to do the work. Just
Sure.
just to set really good boundaries.
Yeah.
But I think even spending some time talking about culture, but letting them be exposed to culture, which again is
Yeah.
sort of it's a little less able to talk about how you do that necessarily. I
Mhm.
think it varies according to an organization, but I think they need to be really kind of connected to the culture, mission,
Mhm.
values kind of first off. They kind of they need to get into it pretty quick,
Yes.
I think.
Yes. Absolutely. I love, love, love what you talked about with, scheduling things out. So they're coming into the organization with meetings on their calendar. They have a really good sense of how they're going to be spending their time. Nothing is worse. And we see it all the time with, the recruitment work that we do. And this is something we advise our clients on pretty extensively, which is, plan that time. Don't let them come in not having any idea how they're going to be spending their first day. There's nothing
Yeah,
worse than
it's the
being at a new
worst.
job and like
Gosh, it's the
sitting at your
worst.
desk thinking, should I be
What
doing
am I?
something? Am I supposed to
I
be somewhere right now?
I must be a terrible employee. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm sitting here looking at my screen.
Exactly. So I
I
love
think we've
that.
all been in that situation before.
Yes, so many
And then
times.
like the manager's so busy, they have no time for you to like, they're like, I'm so, so
Exactly.
sorry. Like and then like, that's another thing is like clear your calendar. Like
Yes.
if you're the manager or you're the person doing that, clear it.
Yes.
Do not try and squish other meetings in there because
No.
even if you're not going to be hanging over the person the whole time, but
Sure.
you want to be available to them.
Hmm.
And I think that's maybe the biggest thing is clear your calendar.
Yeah,
Get that thing
absolutely.
so that you're available.
That's great advice. Another thing I want to talk about is even before you have, in a new hire situation, and honestly, even board members, I think this is applicable. How do you identify who you're looking for? How do you
Mm.
find consensus among the stakeholders so you have clarity on who are we even trying to find to fill this position? What does that person look like? How do you find that clarity and that alignment?
One of the things that happens a lot with nonprofits is, and partially because they tend, not all of them, but we tend to be relatively small
Mhm.
teams and somewhat fluctuating.
Sure.
So it seems like whenever someone leaves a nonprofit, it's the opportunity for the executive director or the board of directors to sort of rethink, is that the same way that we want to shape that position? Are we going
Mhm.
to make any sort of systems changes in staffing? So hopefully, if that happens, you've got some of that
Right.
kind of a little more well defined, as opposed to we've always hired this kind of person and we're just going to like plug and play
Mhm.
exactly what that means. I think the other thing is just the world has changed so much so quickly.
Yes.
It almost feels like with every time you have to hire somebody for a new position, you really should be looking at like, how is this different than in previous years? How do
Yeah.
we communicate this? Um, I think you have to kind of almost unless again you're like a huge nonprofit that has like hundreds and hundreds of employees and you don't have the time for that,
Mhm.
especially with smaller teams. I think it really is a good chance to kind of relook at how you're shaped, what the hiring
Yes.
environment looks like, what success looks like. We've been doing a lot around like cross-functional teams,
Okay.
and which is great and I think has worked well for us,
Mhm.
but also brings its own, like there's some downsides to that too. Like it used to
Sure.
be kind of easy. It was like this was your department, you did your thing, nobody else was affected except maybe your manager when you were gone or you
Yeah.
left or things went haywire or sideways or whatever. Now because like I think we're a better organization. I think you can sort of see in our marketing and our community impact, and like they're the same. Like it's like our
Mhm.
product is
Yeah.
our impact, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
So that's great, but it also requires more communication
Sure.
and coordination, like internally.
Yes.
So there's a little bit more time spent on that than like the kind of task list of getting stuff checked off a list. So depending on your personality, right? And that's another thing is like, and I don't know if I've cracked the code on this, Amanda. So if you can give me any insights, I would really love it. But like sometimes you can't really hire for personality, but you sort of know the kind of personalities sometimes that maybe you're lacking on your team, and you'd like to kind
Mhm.
of like pull somebody in that has maybe more of like a fun personality and kind
Hmm.
of, or somebody who's more of like the task oriented person that you kind of know you might need to bring to the team.
Yes. That's actually
And
something we do a lot.
do you? So that's so
Yes.
interesting. That's that would be a great training, because it's like you don't want to break
Yeah.
any rules,
Right.
like
Exactly.
HR rules, but you also do sometimes like kind of have in mind like there's a certain kind of person that and it's not like it's a personality trait as opposed
Yes.
to and it's fit with the team, and it's maybe gaps in the organization,
Yes.
where you think
Yeah,
that could be really helpful, but like
it
you
is.
can't
For sure.
advertise like in a job description, a certain kind of personality, like Myers-Briggs, INTP.
Yeah, that definitely don't want to do that. But we do, that
No,
is something
but
we highlight a lot is the kind of behavioral fit side of things.
mhm.
And again, this is applicable for staff, for board members, for volunteers. And
Yeah, oh,
there
for sure.
are just understanding the makeup of the existing team and from a behavioral standpoint and where there are gaps. So okay, we've got folks on the team who, are really great task people, but we're really light on folks who are, more people focused.
Yeah,
And so when we are facing tough times as an organization, the work's going to get done. That's not a problem, but the team
yeah,
starts to crumble because we don't have those, the team cheerleaders, as we call them, the people who are,
yeah,
focused on that cohesion and that strong team dynamic. So that is something that we look at when we work with organizations to make hires is let's look at the behavioral makeup of the team. And we happen to use a tool called predictive index
mm,
for that, but it allows us to get a more complete picture of the team that this person would be coming into, and what is the ideal behavioral makeup to help try to fill some gaps. And you're exactly right. That's a great way to bring more balance to the team in a more diverse capacity, not just, the
yeah.
skill set, the experience, the
Skill
background.
set.
That's relevant, but the
I wrote that
behavioral.
down. Predictive index. I think
Yes.
that's really
Yes.
fascinating.
It's a
Well,
great.
and kind of going back to, it's a little bit like what you do at the beginning, and also a little pre work on onboarding, but like
Mhm.
you're onboarding to the position that you're hiring for. You're onboarding
Yes.
to the culture of the organ and the structure of the
Yes.
organization. Because usually, even if you have your position, you need to know something more about the company that you're working for. And then you're onboarding them to the team as
Right.
well.
Yep.
And in some cases, like in some organizations, not everyone, but we're often onboarding them to the entire community because we
Sure.
have so many stakeholders. So we've got
Absolutely.
these 38 agencies, and we've got donors, and we've got workplaces, and we're a very sort of public facing organization. And
Mhm.
so we're sort of onboarding them to the rest of the world, to the
Yeah.
public. Now that's done in a different kind of way through meetings, and maybe it's a little bit of social media and things like that. But
Sure.
I think that onboarding to the team is
Mhm.
really a key piece too, that sometimes we don't think through
Yes. I
quite
think
as
a lot of
much.
times it's a secondary,
Hmm.
if it's even on the radar.
One of the things that I do, and I'm sure it drives some of my team members crazy, but like they sort of know, and it doesn't happen that often, because we have a small team, but whenever someone new starts, like we all know it's going to be a real long staff meeting. Like we have a
Mhm.
weekly staff meeting, and there's a lot that we do in that staff meeting that's kind of culture building. It's not just like, what's the work of this week, or, what are the kind of key priorities.
Sure.
But especially when it's someone new, it's like everybody tells like who they are, what they do, a little
Yeah.
bit about like it's personality and anything they want to share like more personally.
Mhm.
And the same is sort of true. You just because to me, it feels really important to build those relationships as early on as
Absolutely.
possible. And kind of, so it's like the very first thing that they do is
Mhm.
basically spend a whole bunch of time getting to know their fellow team members,
Yes.
and vice versa, and vice
Yeah,
versa.
it's incredibly important. And so I'd like you to talk a little bit about the onboarding component from the board perspective too, because I
Mhm.
think a lot of times we see when we work with clients and we do, board retreats and things of that nature, where you have new board members coming on. And I think that assumption piece plays, I would argue, even a bigger role on the board than it does with the team, because a lot of times I think, there's an assumption when somebody's brought onto a board that they know what the function of the board is. They understand the ins and outs of the organization. They understand what's expected of them as a board member. And a lot of times, none of those things are things that they understand. And so how have you, worked to make sure that as you're bringing new board members on, that they're feeling well equipped and understand what's expected of them?
So I'm sure you all talk about this in some of the places that you talk about, like board governance, but
Mhm.
definitely, I try and do a one-on-one meeting. Sometimes it's in the recruitment process. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's as part of, I have other board members who are recruiting, but I think it's important for them to connect with me as the executive director.
Absolutely.
And I want to get to know them too. So it's not just like me telling them what we're about or what it means to be a board member. It's like
Mhm.
me understanding their personality, their background, also building that trust as
Yes.
well. Like, I think they need to feel really comfortable with me as the executive director so that, again, I can be doing operations and they are the strategy, they're doing what a board should be doing and the
Yeah.
executive director is doing what the executive, but they have to kind of trust you in order to do that.
Yes.
And so, whatever it takes to kind of build some rapport if I don't know them already. And that definitely happened with me, by the way, in the merger.
Okay.
So when we merged our two United Ways, we just literally put the two boards together.
Okay.
So it seemed the easiest way in terms of like kicking people off and
Yeah.
percentages of like how many of the, North board and South board and all this stuff that we were
Sure.
dealing with. But it meant that I didn't get to do that onboarding process, right? It was just like,
Right.
here's your board.
Yeah.
And you're sort of doing like some retroactive, work
Course
with
correcting. Yeah.
building trust and things like that. So sometimes you can't do that, but like in an ideal world, I want to at least get to know who they are and build that
Yeah.
trust. And then we do
Absolutely.
an orientation, like a formal orientation,
Mhm.
where all new board members are involved. And again, I pull in a couple of other board members into that, so it's not just like me. It's like my
Yeah.
finance person is talking about our financials. The board chair is there, the board president,
Yep.
and they might talk about like the mission and history and strategic plan. Like we just finished up a strategic plan. So let me
Mhm.
walk you through this strategic plan because this is
Yeah.
a document we're going to refer to every month. And then again, I think part of it is those expectations that it's okay that you don't know everything. You're
Yes.
going to get to spend 9 months, 9 board meetings ish. We have a couple of more social things that we do as a board in place
Sure.
of board meetings, but getting, you're going to see what the board packet looks like, on a regular basis. You're going to see how the conversation goes, kind of what the culture is.
Mhm.
Um, so we try and do some of that in the orientation. Now, what we don't do, and I actually think we have talked about it on our board governance committee, especially because now our board has gotten like pretty big.
Sure.
So when we did that, like just put the boards together, it was 35 people, which
Oh
was
my
a
gosh.
lot, a
Wow.
lot.
Yes.
And so now, after like kind of 1 year of doing that, we've whittled it down to about 29. And probably in a perfect world, we'll get to 25. And
Mhm.
that's a pretty big board. Most people don't
Yeah.
have that big of a board, but with United Way, it's sort of helpful because we have such a large span
Yeah.
of sort of just stakeholders.
Mhm.
But I think the idea of like a mentor on a
Yes.
board is a great one. And
Yes.
we've
Agreed.
not done it before, but I think now is probably a great time for us to do that,
Mhm.
where it's kind of like you assign somebody a mentor for their first year.
Mhm.
They sit with them, they kind of chat with them, they make them feel welcome,
Yeah.
they're there if they have questions about, because a lot of times you end up talking about things that, again, like you decided 2 years ago, or it was a conversation, and people who are new aren't caught
Mhm.
up. And, outside of repeating all the stories, all the time,
Yeah.
which, most people don't have time for. I think that's a great practice.
Yes.
And probably actually would be a great practice in an organization as well with a new employee,
Yeah,
is to have just maybe
definitely.
someone else that they can go to besides their direct supervisor,
Mhm.
or manager. But
Yeah.
again, we haven't done that, but I've seen some nonprofits that do that, and I think that it works really, really good.
Yeah.
Building that sense of connection too.
Yes, definitely. The culture, the mission, all of it. Yeah, I completely agree.
I think what I see with board members who don't get fully onboarded,
Yep.
it kind of goes back to how we started the conversation around engagement.
Yes.
It's like they don't participate in meetings, or like that's one of those last minute, I had something come up with,
Yes.
a soccer game, and you're sort of like, you didn't know about that
Did you
soccer
though?
game before 3 p.m. today.
No.
Uh,
Surprise
no,
soccer games. Come on, they
actually,
happen all the time.
there are some people that I actually do believe didn't know about it, because that's kind of like how they roll.
So, like, honestly
I'm
fair.
like, oh, with you, actually, I do think that might be the case. um, Listen, we all know, we've had those board members,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
hopefully none of my board members aren't listening to this. They'll be
She's
like, "Oh my gosh,
obviously
that's
not talking
me."
about you. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's
funny.
that other Dave that's on the board.
Yeah, right.
Um,
That's funny.
but like that is, but you see it, like they don't talk,
Yes.
they don't show up, they don't come to the social hour, or
Yeah.
the social meetings that we have. And part of it is they just haven't felt that true strong sense to the, and a lot of times people agree to be on boards because they feel honored by it, and
Sure.
they're like, oh, and they want to help,
Mhm.
but they either don't know what it means to be a board member, and many people don't. And you
Correct.
can do board trainings all day long and encourage people to go, but like in the end, like, and I think somebody kind of has to tell you what it means to be a board.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
I
Could
really
not agree
do.
more.
And I mean, I think about 15, 16 years ago when I first started in nonprofits, I didn't know anything about board governance.
Mhm.
So I learned a little bit, like with the current board, like you kind of know what you know. And
Sure.
so the board that I had was sort of how I thought boards were supposed to function.
Mhm.
And then just along the way of picking up, doing some learning, I started to learn, oh, maybe that's not exactly the way it's supposed to work. And actually it's on me as the executive director to be a really strong part of making those changes
Right.
and building the culture, and not completely relying on like a nominating committee or a board governance committee to really just, again, you don't want to strong arm anyone. You don't want to
Right.
be so authoritative, but I think you learn pretty quickly that if you have a problem with your board, it's probably you
Yeah.
a little bit.
That's a great point, starting with that internal reflection and that kind of
Yeah.
holding up the mirror.
I
And
think
that
actually, I think the same way about leadership too. It's like even with teams, it's like
yes.
if you're complaining about, it's probably you. It really is. Like,
You're the problem.
it's me. I'm the problem. It's me. But versus like, what am I
Yeah.
doing that's creating this, right?
Yeah.
Like if there's a lack of engagement, or if there's people not responding, or they're not getting stuff in on time, like maybe they've got too much on their plate,
Sure.
or maybe I'm not being clear, or
Mhm.
maybe we need to take a step back and do some more fun things because people are seriously getting burnt out, So
Mhm.
I think we always have to be doing that internal reflection of like, what am I doing as the leader to create this culture and this result? Because there's
Yes.
something I'm doing probably that's creating this. Okay,
Yes.
outside of like, you got a sociopath or something,
Sure.
on
Right.
your
There's
team,
always
but
those extenuating circumstances, but
and
yes.
if you have a sociopath, you got another problem.
Yeah, where you've got that's a completely different conversation. That's a whole separate episode.
That's a different podcast. That's like a true crime podcast.
Yes.
It's like
Yep.
what
Moving
happens
into
when a
different
board
territory.
member is a sociopath.
But that's actually a really nice transition to kind of the last point that I'd like you to touch on, which is, and I think that internal reflection is such an important part of this, no organization, no board is perfect, right? Things
Mhm.
get derailed,
Yep.
focuses change, positions evolve, funding gets cut. There's always going to be situations that cause a sort of course correct to be
Mhm.
necessary on what is our focus, what are we, how do we achieve that alignment on what we need and what we're working toward. So when those sort of challenges or blips happen, how do you course correct?
I tend to be a bit of an over communicator. I feel like it's better to
Mm,
over communicate than under communicate.
1000%. Yes.
And so I also am a very hopeful person. So I do believe and sometimes I have been wrong, but I don't believe there's any situation that can't, at least there's not the possibility and
Mhm.
potential for course correction. So
Yes.
even if you feel like you've gone way down the road, so for me, the first thing is to just like sort of pause for a minute,
Mhm.
and a little bit of that internal, like, what's been going on here? Let me understand. Let me clarify what's going on. Like, what might have gone wrong, or how did we get derailed, or what's sort of like the key issues before I go into the communication? Because
Yeah.
I think some of us tend to be like so action oriented, and that's
Mhm.
definitely me. It's like, let's fix it now, and we want to get to like fixing it, and like, this feels uncomfortable, and I don't like it. Right? This doesn't feel right, and we want to make sure it's better. And again, that's, I've only learned this through like years of like lots of mistakes in this area. But even just taking, a little bit of time and understanding where we might have gotten off,
Yes.
I think is helpful, so
Mhm.
that you make sure you have the right conversation, if it's indeed a conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah.
So typically I think there is some kind of conversation, whether it's with like, a new hire and things don't seem to be going well, or it's a board member and they're not engaged, or a volunteer, or
Mhm.
even if it's a new initiative that you've sort of started and it's just not picking up traction or something, or
Yeah.
momentum. So I think the conversation is really more like a listening conversation.
Yes.
And so it's like, I've noticed, like some of those words, like I've noticed, or,
Mhm.
I've observed, and, can you tell me more about what might be going on, or what's been
Mhm.
your experience, or correct me if I'm reading the situation, wrong.
Mhm.
So I think it's kind of like a listening, clarifying conversation that has to be had
Yes. I think that's great
first.
advice. Absolutely. And turning that, doing the reflection and observing, and I think a lot of times, especially people who are prone to be problem solvers, they
Mhm.
want to just jump right in and start fixing it, or, jump right in and kind of take things back over themselves. It's like, well, hold on. No, no. You've got to take the time. And I like what you said about the pause and
Mhm.
just observe and listen and ask the questions, and, keep kind of going a level deeper, level deeper, level deeper on the why is this happening, to
Yeah.
get to whatever that root cause is. I think that's such an important exercise. And the people who are focused on problem solving just jump straight to that. And then
Mhm.
you could be, and in many cases very likely are, addressing something that's just a symptom of a different
Right.
problem,
Right.
and you have no idea what that bigger problem is.
Right. Are we solving the right problem? Like, let's
Mhm.
clarify that we're solving the right problem. And of course, the thing about course correction is sometimes if it's a really simple situation, it's just matter of like, oh, there was a miscommunication back then, or I didn't
Mhm.
understand that, like, oh, Outlook invites meant that, and I accepted them, and that meant I went.
Yeah.
Um, but if it's deep, if it's a lot deeper than that, then, I think I think it's sort of a little ways problem solving together on
Yes.
that. Like, what do you need, like, to understand what's expected of you in this role, or
Mhm.
what do you need to find the time to learn a little bit better about like what you should be doing, or
Yep.
um and then there are just some people who do need a lot of communication and clarification.
Yes.
And it's just, and sometimes you just have to spend some of that one-on-one time with them.
Mhm.
And some people do just take longer than others to
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
to learn and get onboarded. And you know a- again, like, I don't want to keep taking it back to the merger that we've done, but it was a bit of an unusual situation. We had two entities, and we were kind of in a management agreement with
Mhm.
with the other United Way. And so I actually was sort of in charge of, with their board, which was not my board at the time, hiring
Mm-hmm.
for a position that we decided on together, that if we didn't merge would end up being something. And if we did merge, then it was going to be kind of what we originally sort of planned. So
Sure.
I did all the work of like hiring, we kind of interviewed together, but then it was on me to onboard this person to the team, the culture, which from the start, I was like, it's going to be changing.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was an unusual situation where and we had two offices. So he had his own, like he was in a different like geographical location. So
Yeah.
really lots of intentionality about me being up there,
Mm-hmm.
me being in a different office than my office was at, having him be in this office where I was at, lots of intentionality around team conversations that we would alternate between Zoom, everyone on Zoom, sometimes hybrid, and doing things that I'd never done before with a position and a process that I had never done.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really important for me to be really clear about, like, this role might actually change.
Right.
I think the core of what we hired you for is not
Mm-hmm.
really changing, but what it looks like is going to change because we don't know yet what this is going to be.
Right.
And he's still here, 18 months later.
Yeah.
So, and I think he feels really connected to the team. And from the start, that was the most important thing, to make sure like that team onboarding happened when we knew that was the thing that was going to kind of keep
mm-hmm.
us together in the midst of like lots of work, changing processes, things thrown at us that we had to kind of problem solve and adapt to, in the moment,
mm-hmm.
Let alone like expanded work too, because
Sure.
we were changing in size.
Definitely.
But that person, I would say, did need a lot of extra clarification
Mm-hmm.
and support from me in that process, both because of personality and learning style, and because of just the circumstances we were in at the time.
Yeah. And I think the recognition of that is super important. And, acknowledging to a previous point that you made that not everybody learns the same way, not everybody absorbs information the same way or at the same speed. So always leaving room for, additional clarification, additional conversations, additional listening. That's incredibly, incredibly important. And I think, that's a perfect example of exactly what that needs to look like.
I mean, I think what we've identified is that it's just a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think, I think you can have a process or a document for onboarding, and it's important to have that, but really good onboarding is kind of customized to the person, the situation, the position, where are we at, in our, like, even in our fiscal year or season of, organizational phase. And that's why we don't want to do it that often. Because it really is. It takes a lot of time.
It does.
And thoughtfulness and intention. And if you have to do it a lot because you do a mishire, or there like that sort of clarity that we started with isn't there, you're going to be doing it again. And it's going to be just as much work. So I think acknowledge it is work. It is definitely a lot of work. Yes,
it is. And I think that's like the perfect cherry on top for wrapping up what this episode has been all about. So some really great nuggets today. I think, the preparation beforehand, the onboarding process, the not being afraid to course correct when things inevitably, life happens, things happen, not being afraid to course correct and admit, hey, I think we've gotten a little off track. Let's refocus. I think, you've shared some really great nuggets and some good practical tips for how people can do that. So before we close, if there's one piece of advice that you want a listener to walk away from today's episode with, what is it?
I think it's just be intentional. Do not assume.
My favorite word.
Or just, I know, it's like, do not assume or go into, I lost the word, not robot mode, but like autopilot, robot mode. Maybe we should call it something different now, like AI mode or something, where you just like type it in and we know the answer.
I mean,
but like actually truly put some thought. It doesn't have to be a lot, but like put some thought in it before you get that employee or that board member. Just put a little bit of extra thought and intention and customization into it. And I think it does pay dividends.
It does. Absolutely. Very well said. Amy Rohler, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And thank you to our listeners for listening to the aha moment. Of course, I would remind you to subscribe on Spotify to make sure you never miss a new episode. And if you're curious to learn a little bit more about us, we are Decision Associates. You can find us on LinkedIn. Our website is decisionassociates.net. And we are so, so grateful for you, Amy, for taking some time to chat with our listeners today.
I had a great time. Thanks.